The message came on a cold morning in December. Every radio station on Earth went silent at the same moment. Every television screen turned black. Every phone, every computer, every device that could receive signals stopped working for exactly 30 seconds. Then the voice began to speak. It spoke in every language at once. It spoke to farmers in China and bankers in New York. It spoke to children in schools and soldiers in barracks. It spoke to the entire human race with a single message that changed everything. People of Earth, you have been observed. You have been measured. You have been judged ready. The Galactic Council of 47 civilizations summons your representatives to the neutral station at coordinates that follow. You have 30 of your days to comply. Failure to appear will result in permanent quarantine of your solar system. This is not a request. The message repeated 3 times. Then every device on Earth returned to normal. Admiral Catherine Brooks was drinking coffee in her office at the Pentagon when the message arrived. She set down her cup very slowly and watched the words scroll across her screen. She read them once, twice, 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person she trusted completely. "Daniel," she said, when Commander Daniel Price answered. "Get to my office. Now." Daniel arrived within the hour. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He was a veteran of 3 wars who had seen enough to know when something was truly wrong. He read the message without speaking. When he finished, he looked at Catherine with an expression she had never seen before. 47 civilizations, he said quietly. "We always wondered if we were alone. Now we know." Catherine nodded. "And they're not asking us to join them. They're ordering us to appear." The United Nations called an emergency meeting that same day. World leaders flew to New York from every corner of the globe. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and dictators, all of them gathered in one room to discuss the most important event in human history. Catherine was not invited to speak. She was military, not political, and the politicians wanted to handle this themselves. She sat in the back of the observation gallery and watched them argue. The Russian president wanted to send weapons. The Chinese premier wanted to send scientists. The American president wanted to send diplomats. The British prime minister suggested sending all 3. For 6 days, they argued, shouted, threatened, and bargained. In the end, they decided on diplomacy. Ambassador Gregory Lane, silver-haired man who had spent his entire life making peace between nations, would lead the delegation. He would bring gifts and kind words. He would bow and smile and accept whatever scraps the council offered. He would represent humanity with humility and grace. Catherine watched the decision being made and felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had spent her career studying enemies, learning their weaknesses, finding ways to win when winning seemed impossible. And she saw something in the council's message that no one else seemed to notice. She saw arrogance. These aliens had watched humanity for years, maybe decades, maybe longer. They had studied humans the way humans studied insects. They had measured and judged and found humanity worthy of a summons, not an invitation. They expected humans to come running like dogs called by their master, and the politicians were ready to prove them right. Catherine left the United Nations building and walked alone through the tall streets of New York. The city was chaos. People were crying, praying, celebrating, panicking. Some held signs proclaiming the end of the world. Others danced in the streets, thrilled at the proof of alien life. Most simply stood in shock, their phones pressed to their ears, trying to reach loved ones who were just as lost as they were. She walked for hours, thinking. By the time she returned to her hotel, she had made a decision. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with the Secretary of Defense. Linda Marshall was a practical woman, a former general who understood that sometimes rules needed to be broken. She listened as Catherine explained her idea. "You want to refuse them?" Linda said slowly. "You want to tell 47 alien civilizations, some of them thousands of years more advanced than us, that we won't come when called?" "I want to show them that we're not what they think we are," Catherine replied. "They've been watching us. They've seen our wars, our divisions, our weaknesses. They think they know exactly what we'll do. They think we'll crawl. And if we don't crawl, if we stand up and say no, what happens then? Catherine pulled a data chip from her pocket and placed it on the table. I've spent the last 3 days analyzing their message. Not just the words, Linda, the data, the coordinates, the technical specifications they use to broadcast across our entire planet. Linda picked up the chip, and they gave us everything. The locations of their homeworlds, the frequencies of their communication networks, the specifications of their defensive systems. Either they're incredibly careless, or they're so confident in their superiority that they don't believe we could possibly use any of it against them. Linda was quiet for a long moment. You want to spy on them? I want to learn about them. I want to understand them. And I want to do it before we send anyone to meet them face to face. Catherine leaned forward. Give me 2 weeks. Let me launch some probes, gather some intelligence. Let me find out what we're really dealing with before we decide how to respond. The delegation is scheduled to leave in 10 days. Then delay it. Claim technical problems. Claim translation difficulties. Claim whatever you need to claim. Just give me time. Linda studied the data chip in her hand. She thought about the politicians arguing. In New York, she thought about the silver-haired ambassador and his plans for humility and grace. She thought about what it meant to represent humanity to the stars. 2 weeks, she said finally. But Catherine, if this goes wrong, if they decide to quarantine us because we didn't show up on time, it's not just your career that ends. It's our entire future. Catherine stood and saluted. I understand, ma'am, but I believe our future depends on showing them who we really are. And we are not a species that crawls. She left the office and began making calls. Within hours, 17 deep space probes were being prepared for launch at secret facilities around the world. Each one was small, dark, and nearly invisible to standard detection systems. Each one carried sensors capable of mapping everything within 1,000,000 miles as the probes launched into the darkness. Catherine stood in her command center in Colorado and watched them go. The politicians were still arguing in New York. The ambassador was still preparing his speeches of humility. The world was still trying to process the fact that they were not alone. But Catherine Brooks was already fighting the first battle of a war that no one else knew had begun. And she intended to win. The ship Endeavor was not beautiful. It was a blocky vessel built for function rather than form, designed to carry cargo and crew across the vast distances between planets. It had made the journey to Mars 16 times and to the outer reaches of the solar system twice. Now it was being asked to travel further than any human vessel had ever gone. Captain Samuel Hart stood on the bridge and watched Earth grow smaller in the viewport. He was a quiet man with dark skin and steady hands, a pilot who had logged more hours in space than anyone alive. He had been chosen for this mission because he did not panic, did not hesitate, and did not ask unnecessary questions. But he had questions now. Admiral Brooks, he said into the communication system. We're clear of Earth's orbital traffic. Permission to ask what exactly we're doing? Catherine's voice came back crisp and clear despite the growing distance. You're going to the neutral station, Captain. Just like the Council demanded. And when we get there, you're going to deliver a message. Then you're going to leave. Samuel exchanged glances with his second-in-command, Lieutenant Maria Santos. She was a small woman with quick eyes, an engineer who could fix anything and hack into systems that were supposed to be unhackable. She shrugged at Samuel's unspoken question. She had given up trying to understand their orders 3 days ago. Understood, Admiral, Samuel said, delivering a message and leaving. Simple enough, but nothing about this mission was simple, and everyone on the Endeavor knew it. The journey to the neutral station took 11 days. The Endeavor's engines, the most advanced humanity had ever built, pushed them through space at speeds that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. Still, they were slow compared to what waited for them at their destination. On the 8th day, Maria called Samuel to the sensor station. Her face was pale. Captain, you need to see this. The display showed the space ahead of them, and it was not empty. Ships of every size and shape filled the void around a massive station that hung in the darkness like a metal moon. There were vessels that looked like insects and vessels that looked like crystals. There were ships that seemed to be made of living tissue, and ships that glowed with inner light. There were thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, and each one was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever created. The neutral station, Samuel said quietly. That's where they want us to go. Maria nodded. I'm reading energy signatures that I don't even understand. Some of these ships, Captain, I don't think they're using physics the way we know it. Samuel stared at the display for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders and turned back to the bridge. Continue on course, he ordered. We have a message to deliver. The Endeavor arrived at the station on the morning of the 11th day. Immediately, communication requests flooded their systems. Voices in dozens of languages demanded identification, credentials, purpose. Scanners swept across their hull. Examining every inch of their primitive vessel, Samuel ignored all of it. Open a channel, he said to Maria. Broadcast on all frequencies. Maria's fingers flew across her console. Channel open, Captain? Samuel took a breath. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about the billions of people counting on him without even knowing his name. He thought about what Catherine Brooks had told him before he left. Show them who we are. Attention Galactic Council, he said, his voice steady and calm. This is Captain Samuel Hart of the Earth vessel Endeavor. We have received your summons and considered your demands. We appreciate your interest in our species and your offer to meet with our representatives. He paused, letting the silence stretch. However, we must respectfully decline your invitation. Earth does not send its people to be summoned like servants. If the Galactic Council wishes to establish relations with humanity, your representatives are welcome to visit our system. We have attached coordinates to this message. Another pause. In the background, Maria's console was lighting up with incoming transmissions. Demands, threats. Expressions of outrage from dozens of species who had never heard such words from a newcomer. Samuel continued as if he heard none of it. We've also attached some additional information that may interest you. Over the past 14 days, our probes have mapped your communication networks, identified your major trade routes, and cataloged the defensive capabilities of your primary worlds. This is not a threat. This is a demonstration of what humanity can accomplish when motivated. He smiled slightly, though no one could see it through the audio-only transmission. We look forward to meeting your delegation in our system. Safe travels? He cut the channel. For a moment, the bridge was completely silent. Then Maria laughed. It was a short, sharp sound of disbelief and amazement and fear, all mixed together. Captain, she said, I'm reading 17 warships breaking formation and heading our direction. Time to intercept. 6 hours. Samuel nodded calmly. Then we have 6 hours to leave. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed.
Oh.
The Endeavor turned and ran. Behind them, the neutral station erupted with activity as the Galactic Council tried to process what had just happened. Ships scrambled. Communications flew back and forth. For the first time in recorded history, an emerging species had rejected the Council's summons, and they had done it with a smile. Back on Earth, Catherine Brooks received Samuel's transmission and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first phase of her plan was complete. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as beggars hoping for acceptance, but as equals demanding respect. Now came the hard part. The Endeavor arrived home 4 days ahead of its pursuers. The Council ships stopped at the edge of Earth's solar system, uncertain how to proceed. They had expected to chase down a fleeing primitive vessel and drag its crew back for punishment. Instead, they found themselves facing a planet that had somehow, impossibly, prepared defenses. Satellites that had not existed 2 weeks ago now orbited Earth in precise patterns. Ships that should have taken years to build now patrolled the inner system. And behind it all, a network of sensors. And weapons that the Council could not identify or understand. Humanity had not been idle. During the Endeavor's mission, the pursuing ships withdrew to a safe distance and sent a message to the Council headquarters. The message was simple. We need new orders. These humans are not what we expected. High Chancellor Vorath received the message in his private chambers. He read it 3 times, then summoned his advisors. For the first time in 3 centuries, he was uncertain how to proceed. The humans had rejected diplomacy. They had mapped council space in 2 weeks. They had built defenses that should have taken decades. And they had done it all while the council watched. Too confident in their own superiority to believe it was happening, Vorath made his decision. If the humans would not come to the council, then the council would go to them. But this time, they would not go as masters summoning servants. They would go as equals. Ready to negotiate, it was time to find out what humanity really wanted. High Chancellor Vorath had lived for 900 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species destroy themselves and others rebuild from nothing. He had negotiated peace between civilizations that had been at war for longer than humanity had existed. Nothing surprised him anymore, until now. He stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, surrounded by representatives of 47 species. Some were tall and thin, their bodies adapted to low-gravity worlds. Others were short and dense, creatures of heavy planets where every movement required enormous strength. Some breathed oxygen like the humans. Others breathed methane or ammonia or gases that had no name in any human language. All of them were angry. "This is an insult," declared Delegate Koroth of the Montari hegemony. He was a massive creature, his body covered in thick plates that looked like armor. His species had been conquering worlds since before humanity discovered fire. "We should crush them. Show them what happens to primitives who forget their place." "Agreed," said Ambassador Thesik, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. The Veshans were among the oldest species in the council, their civilizations stretching back 50,000 years. They had seen countless young species join the galactic community. None had ever behaved like this. They must be taught a lesson. Vorath let them speak. He watched the anger flow through the chamber like a wave, touching each representative in turn. He waited until the shouting reached its peak, then raised one of his manipulator appendages. Silence fell instantly. "You wish to crush them," Vorath said, his voice calm and measured. "You wish to teach them a lesson? Tell me, honored delegates, what exactly would that accomplish?" Koroth's plates shifted with impatience. "It would show them their place. It would demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Would it?" Vorath activated the chamber's central display. Images appeared, data collected from the council ships that had pursued the human vessel. In the 14 days since we sent our summons, the humans launched 17 probes into council space. 17. Hour. Sensors detected none of them until the humans chose to reveal their presence. The chamber grew quiet as the delegates studied the data. "Those probes mapped our communication networks," Vorath continued. "They identified our trade routes. They cataloged our defensive systems. All of this in 2 weeks, using technology that our own analysts cannot fully understand." "Impossible," Thesik said, but her voice held less certainty than before. "I thought so too. But look at the evidence." More images appeared. Ships in orbit around Earth, satellites forming patterns that looked almost like defensive grids. Signals being transmitted between human installations on frequencies that no council species used. They knew we would pursue their ship. They prepared for it. They were ready. Koroth made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been rage. "You're saying we should fear them? These creatures who have barely left their own planet? I'm saying we should understand them." Vorath turned his ancient eyes toward the Montari delegate. "Your species has been spacefaring for 12,000 years, Koroth. In all that time, how many new technologies has the hegemony developed?" Silence. The Veshans have existed for 50,000 years. When was the last time they discovered something truly new? Thesik's form flickered, but she did not answer. "We have become comfortable," Vorath said. "We have stopped growing. We maintain what we have, protect what we've built, and wait for the universe to change around us." He gestured at the display. "The humans have been spacefaring for less than a century. In that time, they have split atoms, created artificial minds, and built machines that our engineers cannot explain. They do not wait for change. They create it. "What are you suggesting?" asked Delegate Pashira of the Valori Collective. She was a small being, her body covered in soft fur, her large eyes watching Voroth with obvious concern. The Valori were traders, not warriors, and they understood the value of new opportunities. "I'm suggesting we send a delegation to Earth, not to punish them, not to teach them lessons, to negotiate." The chamber erupted again. Voices rose in protest and confusion and disbelief. No emerging species had ever been treated as an equal. The very idea went against everything the Council had stood for since its founding. Vorath waited for the noise to subside. "Consider the alternative," he said when he could be heard again. "We crush them, as Koroth suggests. We destroy their fleets, break their defenses, force them to submit. What then? Do we gain an ally? No, we gain an enemy. An enemy who learned more about our civilization in 2 weeks than we learned about theirs in decades of observation. An enemy who will spend every moment of their existence looking for ways to strike back." And let that thought settle over the assembly.
"How we negotiate?"
"We treat them as equals. Yes, they have demanded. We learn from them as they learn from us. We gain a partner instead of an enemy." Voreth's manipulator appendages spread wide. "The humans have shown us who they are. They are not servants. They are not supplicants. They are something we have not seen in 10,000 years. They are new." The vote took 3 hours. Species argued and bargained, formed alliances, and broke them. In the end, Voreth's proposal passed by the narrowest margin in Council history. A delegation would be sent to Earth. 3 ships carrying representatives from the Council's founding species. They would not go as conquerors or masters. They would go as negotiators, ready to treat humanity as the equals they had demanded to be. Voroth watched the ships depart from his private observation chamber. He thought about the humans and their impossible achievements. He thought about the probes they had sent into Council space, the defenses they had built in days, the message they had delivered with such confident defiance. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he barely recognized: curiosity. What would these humans do next? What would they ask for? What would they become? He did not know the answers. And that uncertainty, that not knowing, was the most exciting thing that had happened to him in 900 years. The delegation would reach Earth in 14 days. Voreth had given them instructions to listen carefully, negotiate fairly, and report everything they learned. He had also given them a private message to deliver to whoever was in charge of humanity's strange strategy. The message was simple: "Well played. Now show me what else you can do." He suspected the humans would not disappoint him. The Council ships arrived in Earth's orbit on a bright morning in March. 3 vessels, each one larger than the greatest aircraft carrier ever built, positioned themselves above the planet and waited for permission to land. Catherine Brooks watched them from her command center in Colorado. Screens covered every wall, showing feeds from satellites, telescopes, and the network of sensors that humanity had built in the weeks since first contact. She could see every detail of the alien ships, from the strange metals of their hulls to the energy signatures of their engines. They were beautiful in their own way. Elegant designs that had been refined over thousands of years. Technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. And they were here because humanity had forced them to come. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Christopher Dunn from his station nearby, "the lead ship is requesting landing coordinates. They say they're ready to begin negotiations." Catherine nodded. "Tell them to land at Edwards Air Force Base. Full escort. No weapons allowed on the ground. They might object to that, and they can stay in orbit." Catherine allowed herself a small smile. "We're not the ones who traveled 14 days to get here." The aliens did not object. 3 shuttles descended from the main vessels, carrying 9 representatives in total, 3 from each of the founding species of the Galactic Council. They landed on the runway at Edwards and emerged into the California sunshine, surrounded by American soldiers who were trying very hard not to look terrified. Captain Samuel Hart was waiting for them. He had been promoted twice since his return from the neutral station, but he had asked to be present for this moment. He felt he had earned it. Welcome to Earth, he said, his voice steady despite the strangeness of the creatures before him. Please follow me. Admiral Brooks is waiting. Ambassador Desick stepped forward. Her crystalline body caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbow patterns across the tarmac. She was the leader of this delegation, chosen for her experience and her patience. She had negotiated treaties between species that had been at war for centuries. She could handle a few young humans. Thank you for receiving us, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We come in peace and friendship. Samuel almost laughed. Peace and friendship, after their message had threatened to lock humanity in their solar system forever. But he kept his face neutral. There would be time for truth later. The conference room was simple. A long table, comfortable chairs, windows looking out over the desert. No decorations, no displays of wealth or power. Catherine had chosen this simplicity deliberately. She wanted the aliens to understand that humans did not need to impress anyone. She rose as the delegation entered. Ambassador Desick. Chancellor Vorath sends his regards, I assume? Desick's form rippled with surprise. You know who we are? I've been studying your transmissions since the first message. Your internal communications are quite detailed. Catherine gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. The negotiations began slowly. The SIC presented the Council's standard offer for new species. A provisional membership with limited rights. Access to certain trade routes. Permission to travel within defined boundaries. The opportunity to prove themselves worthy of greater privileges over time. Catherine listened politely to everything. Then she placed a data chip on the table.
This is our counteroffer.
Desick retrieved the chip and interfaced with it. For a long moment, she was silent. Then her crystalline form began to pulse with colors Catherine had not seen before. This is ... unprecedented. You want full membership? Immediate voting rights. Access to all trade routes. Permission to travel anywhere in Council space. Yes, no emerging species has ever received such terms. No emerging species has ever mapped Council space in 2 weeks. Catherine leaned forward. Ambassador, let me be direct. We know exactly how the Council has treated new species for the past 10,000 years. You bring them in slowly, carefully, always keeping them dependent on your goodwill. You give them just enough to survive, but never enough to compete. By the time they realize what's happening, they're so entangled in your systems that breaking free would destroy them. Desick did not deny it. That's not going to work with us, Catherine continued. We didn't reject your summons because we were being difficult. We rejected it because we understood exactly what would happen if we accepted. You would have welcomed us with open arms and gentle words, and within a century, we would have forgotten how to think for ourselves. That is not our intention, perhaps not consciously. But it's what happens. Every time. Catherine stood and walked to the window. Let me tell you something about humanity, Ambassador. We spent most of our history fighting each other. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. We built weapons that could end all life on our planet, and we came terrifyingly close to using them. She turned back to face the delegation. But we also built wonders. We created art and music and literature. We cured diseases that had killed millions. We went from horse-drawn carts to spacecraft in less than 200 years. We did all of that while fighting among ourselves, while divided into hundreds of competing nations, while barely able to agree on anything. She walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on its surface. Imagine what we could do united. Imagine what we could accomplish if we weren't held back by your careful management, your gentle restrictions, your patient guidance. Her eyes met Desick's. That's what we're offering. Not just another species to absorb. A partner, an equal. Something new. Desick was quiet for a long time. The other delegates watched her, waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke. The Council has rules, traditions, ways of doing things that have worked for thousands of years. Yes, what you're asking would change. Everything, yes, could destabilize. The entire galactic order. It could also revitalize. Catherine sat back down. Chancellor Voreth sent a message with your delegation. I read it. He's curious about us. He wants to see what we'll do next. I think you are too. The sixth form shifted through several colors. I will need to consult with the Chancellor. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. The negotiations paused while the SIC transmitted everything to the neutral station. Hours passed. Then days. The alien delegates remained at Edwards, studying humanity with the same intensity that humanity studied them. They watched humans work and play and argue and laugh. They saw the chaos and creativity that defined the species. On the fourth day, Desic called for another meeting. The council has made a decision, she announced. Your terms are ... acceptable, with modifications. Catherine nodded slowly. What modifications? You will receive full membership and voting rights. You will have access to all trade routes and freedom to travel where you wish. But there is a condition. Name it. The sixth form glowed with something that might have been anticipation. You will lead an expedition to the Galactic Rim. Regions we have never explored. Dangers we have never faced. You say humanity thrives on challenge. Prove it, Catherine smiled. It was exactly what she had hoped for. Ambassador, she said, you have a deal? 3 years had passed since the day humanity rejected the Council's summons. 3 years of change so rapid and so profound that the galaxy would never be the same. Catherine Brooks stood at the window of her office on the orbital station that now circled Earth. She was no longer an admiral. She was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, first human to hold such a position. And her responsibilities had grown beyond anything she had imagined. Below her, Earth turned slowly in the void. Ships from a dozen species moved through orbital traffic, carrying goods and people and ideas between worlds. Human stations dotted the space around the planet. Factories and laboratories and ports that had been built in record time using technology that combined human creativity with alien knowledge. It was more than she had ever hoped for. And it was only the beginning, Ambassador, said her aide, a young woman named Patricia Vance. The fleet is ready. They're waiting for your final authorization. Catherine turned from the window. The Rim expedition? Yes, ma'am. 12 ships. Crews from 15 different species. Captain Hart is requesting permission to launch. Catherine smiled at the name. Samuel Hart had come a long way from the quiet pilot who had delivered humanity's rejection to the Council. He had earned the command of the first Rim expedition through skill, determination, and a reputation for achieving the impossible. There was no one she trusted more to lead humanity's greatest adventure. Tell him he has authorization, and tell him to make us proud. Patricia nodded and left to deliver the message. Catherine returned to the window and watched as 12 ships broke from orbit and accelerated toward the edge of known space. They carried the hopes of billions, not just humans, but members of every species that had chosen to join the mission. They were heading into the unknown, into regions that had never been explored, into dangers that no one could predict. It was exactly the kind of challenge that humans were born for. On the lead ship, Samuel Hart sat in the captain's chair and watched the stars stretch into lines as they entered faster-than-light travel. His crew was a mix of species, humans working alongside the Seans and Velkari, and half a dozen others. 6 months ago, such cooperation would have been unthinkable. Now, it was simply how things were done. Course plotted and confirmed, reported his navigator. Velkari named Pashira, who had volunteered for the mission against the objections of her entire family. First waypoint, in 17 hours. Engine status. Optimal, said his chief engineer. A human named Marcus Green who had helped design the hybrid drive system that powered their ships. Better than optimal, actually. The new modifications are exceeding projections. Samuel nodded. The modifications had been a collaboration between human engineers and Neshan scientists. Combining human innovation with thousands of years of alien knowledge, the result was something new, something neither species could have created alone. That was the pattern now. Everywhere Samuel looked, he saw cooperation producing miracles. Human doctors had combined their knowledge with Valkyrie biologists to create treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple worlds for centuries. Human architects worked with Veshan engineers to design structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Human artists had introduced concepts and techniques that were spreading across council space, inspiring new forms of expression that no one had imagined before. And in return, humanity had gained access to knowledge and resources that had accelerated their development by centuries. Technologies that would have taken generations to discover were now available for study and improvement. Trade relationships that brought prosperity to billions. Friendships that crossed the boundaries of species and culture. It was everything Catherine Brooks had fought for. And it was only possible because humanity had refused to accept their assigned place. Back on the orbital station, Catherine received a communication request from the council headquarters. She accepted it and found herself looking at the familiar form of High Chancellor Vorath. "Ambassador Brooks," he said, his ancient voice carrying overtones of warmth that Catherine had learned to recognize. "I understand the expedition has launched?"
It has, Chancellor.
Captain Hart and his crew are on their way to the rim. I watched the departure. It was quite moving. Vorath's manipulator appendages gestured in what Catherine knew was an expression of satisfaction. 3 years ago, your species rejected our summons. I confess I was uncertain how to respond. Many on the council wanted to punish you for your defiance.
I remember, but I chose to be curious instead.
I wanted to see what would happen if we treated you as equals. His form shifted slightly. I was not disappointed. Catherine smiled. "We aim to please, Chancellor. You aim to exceed," Vorath corrected. "That is what makes you so interesting. Every species we have encountered in the past 10,000 years has been content to find their place in the existing order. They accept our guidance. They follow our rules. They become part of what already exists, and us. You change everything you touch. You question every assumption. You push every boundary." Vorath made a sound that Catherine had learned was laughter. "Do you know what the council calls you now when they think humans cannot hear? I'm sure it's very complimentary. They call you the children who would not listen. Some mean it as an insult. Others, like myself, mean it as praise." Vorath's ancient eyes seemed to focus more intently on her. "You have revitalized our civilization, Ambassador. You have reminded us what it means to grow, to change, to reach for things we cannot yet see." Catherine thought about those words for a long moment. "Is that why you agreed to our terms? You wanted to be reminded?" "But mostly I agreed because I saw something in your species that I had not seen in a very long time. Hope. Not the hope of those who wait for good things to happen. The hope of those who make good things happen." Vorath's form seemed to expand slightly. "The Rim expedition will face dangers we cannot imagine. Some of your people may not return. But I believe you will discover things out there that change the galaxy forever. We intend to. I know." Vorath's voice carried something that sounded almost like fondness. "That is why I'm glad you rejected our summons. If you had come when called, if you had accepted your place at the bottom of our hierarchy, you would have been just another species. Useful, perhaps. But ordinary? And now? Now you are something new. Something the galaxy has never seen." Vorath's manipulator appendages spread wide. "You are humanity, and I look forward to seeing what you will do next." The communication ended. Catherine sat in silence for a moment, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly before her. Somewhere out there, Samuel Hart and his crew were pushing into the unknown. Somewhere out there, answers waited to be found, and here on Earth and across council space. Humans and aliens were working together to build something that had never existed before. A true partnership of equals. A civilization that grew and changed and reached for more instead of simply maintaining what it already had. It had started with a rejection. A single word that said no to the expected path. No to the safe choice. No to the comfortable future that had been offered. Humanity had startled the galaxy by refusing diplomacy. And in doing so, they had found something better. They had found their destiny. Catherine turned back to her work. There were treaties to negotiate, projects to oversee, new challenges to face. The future was uncertain, filled with dangers and opportunities that no one could predict. She would not have had it any other way. On the edge of explored space, the first Rim expedition continued its journey into the unknown. Behind them, the lights of civilization faded to distant points. Ahead of them, darkness stretched without end. Captain Samuel Hart stood on his bridge and watched the void before them. His crew worked at their stations, members of a dozen species united by curiosity and courage. They did not know what they would find. They did not know what challenges awaited them, but they knew they would face them together. And they knew that whatever happened, they would keep moving forward. That was what humanity had taught the galaxy. Not to wait for change. Not to accept limits. Not to be content with what was offered, but to reach for more. Always more.